Hello, I'm Tiffany Griffith, Director of Writing for the University of Evansville, and I'd like to welcome you to our DVD instructional series on writing. Today, we're going to talk about the writing process and the rhetorical situation. We all struggle with where to begin a paper. Having a process that you can go to helps alleviate confusion, frustration, and anxiety. So, let's talk about the writing process. It's perhaps more accurate to actually use the phrase writing processes because they vary so widely from person to person and from project to project. The process that you use to write an English literature paper may be different from the process that you use to complete that chemistry report. So, different processes for different people and for different situations. No matter what process you use, there are 3 or 4 key components that should probably be fairly consistent. The first is the planning stage. The second is drafting. Third is revising. Revision is sometimes broken into 2 parts, either global and local revision or revision and editing. With planning, start with generating ideas. Seems like a logical first step. When you're planning and you're trying to generate ideas, a lot of people get stuck and they get terrified. This is where process is really going to be helpful. Think about what you like. What's good for you? Are you a list maker? I'm a big fan of the list myself. I have lists of my lists. They help you stay on track. So you might make lists of ideas that you have about a topic. Brainstorming can be closely linked to this. What do you know about your topic? What do you need to know about your topic? Just coming up with a big cloud, basically, of everything that you might want to say or think about the topic. If you're visual, clustering can be very, very helpful. You start with one idea and put it in the center. You might say cars. Circle it. And then start thinking about everything you know about cars. Well, okay, makes, models, transmission, maintenance, drivers, insurance, speeding, going to jail for speeding. Not advisable. So what you want to do then is circle all of the different outlying topics and draw lines back to the middle and look for connections. Sometimes this is also called a web diagram or mapping because it lets you have a visual representation of how your ideas are going to come together. Free writing is a very popular and very, very helpful means of generating ideas, both about a topic or to figure out what you know about a topic. Sit down, give yourself some time in a quiet space, and just write, nonstop, about anything, whatever comes into your head. If you want to sit there and write about the fact that you can't think of anything to write about and that it's really, really annoying, that's perfectly fine. It might lead you on to something that could be useful later on. You might then go back through your free writing and look for any ideas that could be useful. Look for common themes. Maybe there are a couple of ideas that keep popping up over the course of your free writing. Then you might do a second free writing based on what you pull from this first one. A few general tips as far as generating ideas go. Don't wait for inspiration to just magically appear. As much as we would like it to be so, inspiration is not a magical fairy with a wand in a pink tutu who's going to smack you upside the head with the inspiration wand and ta-da, you'll magically have a brilliant idea and a brilliant paper fully formed and ready to go. Be proactive. Take charge of the process and the paper. Write about what you know. I'm sure we've all been given this piece of advice. It's a good place to start. If you're writing a research paper on a topic you're not familiar with, if you start with what you do know, you can then figure out where you need to go, what you need to learn, what you need to research. Try to be consistent in terms of the times that you write. This might be helpful if there's a time of day when you know you think really well. Maybe that's the best time for you to start thinking about doing some writing. Keep your mind on what you're doing. Keep your topic in the back of your head when you're going through your everyday activities. That way your brain is mulling it over in your subconscious, so when you sit down to work again, you might be surprised at something that popped into your head that you hadn't thought of before. Give yourself enough time. A key portion of the writing process, particularly in the planning stage, is incubation. And that's the stage where we just sort of let ideas percolate and roll around in our head. Don't, however, confuse incubation with procrastination. If you wait until the last minute, it's very difficult to fully and effectively make use of the writing process. Force yourself to write, even if you don't want to, even if it's just free writing. It can help you get started so you're not just staring at a blank computer screen or a blank piece of paper. And accept rough ideas. Don't censor yourself early in the writing process. This is the time to accept ideas as they come to you. Make use of what you get. Something very important to consider during the planning stage of a writing project is the rhetorical situation. What, you may ask, is the rhetorical situation? It sounds very formal and intimidating. It's basically broken down into a few key components: purpose, audience, and context. Now, first, you want to think about your reason. Why are you writing to begin with, other than the fact that your instructor has probably given you an assignment? Think about the problem or the topic or the issue that's getting you writing in the first place. And from there, think about your purpose. Your purpose is basically what you're trying to accomplish. What is it that you're setting out to do? Are you trying to inform, to present information, to share an experience or clarify your emotions? Are you trying to persuade, to get someone to consider something in a new way, to propose a solution to a problem? Are you trying to convince someone that they should reconsider an action or an idea? Or are you simply trying to entertain? Why is it important to think about purpose? Because the purpose is going to affect the outcome and the clarity and the way you approach your whole assignment. Your purpose is going to affect the kind of details that you include, the kind of vocabulary that you use, and your approach or your tone. Whether you need to be serious, whether you can be informal and casual, whether you can use humor, and whether you can have a conversational tone. Important to purpose and the whole writing process can hinge on this key element: audience. Who is your audience? Who's going to be listening? Who's going to be reading? What do you know about these people? What do they know about your topic? If you have a fairly targeted and specific audience who has a fair amount of knowledge about the topic that you're discussing, then you can probably leave out a lot of the small background detail. However, if you're addressing a broader audience, you might have to provide some context for what you're discussing. What characteristics can you assume members of your audience have in common? What do they have in common with you? Are your values the same? How are they going to feel about someone trying to get them to think about something from a new angle or in a new way? How open are their views going to be? How open to views are they that are different from their own? What do you not know about your audience? How professional is your audience going to expect you to be? This can affect things like the perennial question writing instructors get: can I use first person? So, what do you know about these people? What do they know about what you're going to be writing about? Key considerations when putting together your essay. One of the other important parts of the writing process, the planning stage, the rhetorical context, or the rhetorical situation, is context. What are the circumstances under which you're writing? What are the circumstances under which writer and reader are going to communicate? Things like time, place, social factors, religious factors, political factors are all going to contribute to making up the context in which you're writing. Writing is obviously going to be influenced by your context, no matter what it is you're presenting. So an important part of the planning phase of writing is to consider the rhetorical situation: purpose, audience, context. A couple of final comments as far as the planning stage of the writing process goes. If you need to do research, we mentioned the fact that you need to think about what you know about your topic and what you need to find out. Figure out what it is you need to find out, and then go do your research. Make friends with the library. They're very nice people there. Something else to consider is the idea of outlining. Many people cringe and shudder when they hear the word outlining. Some people lock up because they don't feel like they can work within the parameters of a formal outline. That's okay. I would encourage you to consider putting your ideas on paper in some sort of order, so you have a sense of how you want to put your paper together. What is your organization going to look like? Whether you do a formal outline with capital Roman numeral 1 all the way down to tiny little Roman numeral X. You don't have to be this detailed. Go with what's comfortable for you, whether it's something more formal or whether it's just a list of the order of the topics and how you want to present them. In terms of ordering ideas, one of the best ways to start is from general to specific. Present a broad topic and then move to more specific points about the topic. Examples, illustrations, for instance. Some other types of organization that you can consider are chronological, good for telling a story, order of time, how did the events happen. If you're describing a scene or a picture, you can use spatial organization, moving from left to right, front to back, and top to bottom. One of the most common forms of organization in academic essays is emphatic order, where you build to your strongest point, so that you have a strong finish, leaving your audience with a good impression. The second step in the writing process is drafting. Some argue that this is the easiest part. Some people don't necessarily agree. But basically, drafting is the process of getting your ideas from your brain onto the sheet of paper or into the computer, whichever works best for you. An important thing to keep in mind about drafting: a first draft, no matter how attached to it you are, is not a finished product. Many of us, when we get in a hurry, perhaps we've waited longer than we should to complete the assignment, we'll turn in something that we've just generated, perhaps the night before, perhaps moments before class begins. But if you allow yourself to benefit from the third stage of the writing process, you'll have a better paper. More on that soon. A few tips as far as drafting. Do your best to write your draft in one sitting, if possible, so that way you get everything out of the way and then you can go back and do revision. Don't worry about perfection. I realize this is easier said than done, and many of us anguish. It's awful. We get stuck. We can't go on until everything is perfect. But try not to get bogged down in this particular emotional response to writing. Plow through, get to the revision where you can iron out all of the details. If you get stuck, move on. Come back to your idea later on. Another way that you can help if you're getting stuck is to refer back to an outline or list of order or topics or points that you're wanting to make in your essay. If you're having trouble getting started, relax, take a deep breath. Your instructor's not sitting there in front of you. Your instructor is not going to bite you. Take a deep breath, go get a cup of coffee. If you're still having trouble getting started, pretend that you're writing to a friend or that you're talking to a friend or to your mom. If that still doesn't work, perhaps you need to recruit a friend or kidnap your roommate. You might consider bribery. Chocolate works very well. The important thing is, don't get frustrated. Most serious writers go through multiple drafts when they're working on a project. You don't have to feel like it has to be perfect the first time out. The third step of the writing process is revising. Some people argue that revision is absolutely the most important part of the writing process. While you may not agree with that, you can't escape the fact that revision is essential to creating the best piece of work that you can. So here, let's begin with a few tips as far as revising. Before you revise, take a step away from the work. Give yourself time to not work on your paper for a while so that when you come back to it, you can approach it with a fresh set of eyes. It's important to allow time in the process so that you are able to come back and have this revision stage. Before you revise, it's very helpful to type your first draft so it's cleaner and easier to read for you or for someone else if you're having an extra set of eyes look over your paper. The biggest piece of free advice I can ever give anyone about revision is to read your paper out loud. You may feel uncomfortable doing this, at which point it might be advisable to lock your roommate out or go somewhere where no one's going to bother you. But if you read your essay out loud to yourself, your ear is likely to catch many of the mistakes that you might otherwise miss. You know what you meant to say, but if you're just reading it, you're likely to skim over any errors or repeated words, for instance. Don't be afraid to mark on your revision. The white piece of paper in front of you is not a pristine, perfect, finished piece of writing. You're working to make it even better. So mark it up, cross things out, draw arrows, cut and paste, move entire paragraphs around. Do whatever you need to do to improve that paper. Give yourself enough time for breaks when you're going through the revision process. Again, especially if you're doing it in stages, taking time to step away from the project and come back to it will give you a refreshed and renewed perspective. As far as revision goes, there are usually two components. Some people break revision down into revising and editing. Some people refer to global and local revision. They basically add up to the same thing. Global revision involves your big ticket items, large issues like organization, development, things that contribute to the overall sense and clarity of your paper. Local revision, or editing, sometimes proofreading is also used here, involves your smaller items, things like grammar, wording issues, things that aren't going to affect the overall coherence of the whole piece. So when you're looking at organization, your big ticket items, you want to think about your structure, how you've ordered your ideas. You want to make sure that your paper is unified, that everything relates back to the main idea, and that your paper is coherent, that everything moves logically from one idea to the next. To recap, The writing process involves 3 to 4 key steps: planning, drafting, and revising. You might include editing as part of the revision stage, or you might count it separately. No matter how you decide to label these steps, make the writing process work for you, keeping in mind that one process is not going to work for every single person, and you may need to modify your process based on situations, because what worked for one assignment might not work equally well for another. Additionally, feel free to take advantage of the services of the Writing Center. There are students working at the Writing Center who will be happy to help you with any stage of the writing process, from idea generation, brainstorming, all the way down to editing and proofreading, and helping you look for those final corrections that need to be made, and can help you work to make your completed paper the polished, best product that it can be.